The Valaxian Empire had dominated the Orion Arm for 12,000 years. They'd crushed the Andromedans, subjugated the Pleiades Confederation, and even made the dreaded Psionic hive mind pay tribute. Their ships were technological marvels that could harvest energy directly from quantum foam. Their soldiers wore bio-enhanced battle armor that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. Their neural networks could calculate battle strategies across 17 dimensions simultaneously. And then they met humans. Humans. The annoying little bipeds from that unremarkable yellow star in the unfashionable western spiral of the galaxy. The creatures who had only achieved faster than light travel 3 centuries ago and still thought pizza was the pinnacle of culinary achievement. The same humans who had somehow repelled 4 full-scale Valaxian invasion attempts. The 5th time will succeed, Emperor Thrax the Magnificent had declared, his 17 eye stalks quivering with anticipation. We shall crush these mammals once and for all. This declaration came as the Valaxian flagship, the inevitable conquest, a vessel the size of Earth's moon, approached the human coalition outpost on Proxima Centauri, UI. This outpost wasn't particularly impressive, just a cluster of modular habitats, a few defense batteries, and a communications relay station, but it was strategically vital. Control Proxima Centauri. Control the gateway to the Sol system. Control the Sol system, and humanity would fall. The negotiations had failed spectacularly 2 solar cycles ago. The human ambassador had actually laughed when Emperor Thrax demanded Earth's immediate surrender. Laughed. Then suggested they chill out and maybe grab a beer instead of conquering the galaxy. The Emperor had the ambassador ejected into space only to discover later that the ambassador had been a hologram the entire time, and the real diplomat was safely back on Earth, probably still chuckling. So now it was war, again. The inevitable conquest hung in orbit around Proxima Centauri, i.e., its massive shadow eclipsing the planet's sun. On the command deck, Grand Marshal Vex Kor surveyed the tactical display with his primary and secondary eyes while keeping his tertiary eyes on the status reports. Prepare the unyielding regiment, he commanded. Send our finest warriors. The pride of the 17 galaxies. The unstoppable phalanx. This time, we shall show these humans the true meaning of Valaxian might. Throughout the massive flagship, 10,000 of the Empire's most elite soldiers, each having trained for centuries in the deadly arts of warfare, prepared for battle. They donned their legendary phantom armor, activated their reality-splitting weapons, and boarded their dropships. The outpost below had sent out a distress call just before the Valaxians jammed their communications. But what could the humans possibly send that could stand against the Empire's greatest warriors? Jack Torqueson was having a really bad day. It had started with his coffee synthesizer breaking down again, producing a substance that resembled motor oil both in consistency and, presumably, taste. Then his sonic shower had malfunctioned, leaving one half of his body clean and the other half still covered in the grease from yesterday's repair job on the station's atmospheric recyclers. And now this. A blaring alarm and a message from command. What? Jack barked into his comm unit, not bothering to hide his irritation as he tightened a bolt on the environmental control unit he'd been fixing. Torqueson, we've got a situation at Proxima Centauri outpost, came the crisp voice of Commander Davis. The Valaxians have shown up with what looks like their entire fleet. And this concerns the maintenance department. How exactly? Jack growled, reaching for his prized wrench, a custom-built titanium alloy beauty he'd lovingly nicknamed Problem Solver. The outpost sent a distress call. Their primary fusion core is destabilizing. If it goes critical, everyone within 1,000 clicks gets atomized. Yeah, I know how fusion cores work, Jack interrupted. Don't you have soldiers for the Valaxian problem? Send a military transport. There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end. All combat-ready ships are currently engaged in the Betelgeuse defensive. You're the only qualified mechanic within range who might get there in time." Jack let out a string of curses that would make a space dock worker blush. "So let me get this straight. The Valaxians send their elite warriors. You're sending me? You've got the fastest repair shuttle in the quadrant. And you're the best damn mechanic in the coalition." Jack snorted. "Flattery will get you nowhere, Davis." "It's not flattery if it's true. You fixed the quantum entanglement drive on the Hermes when the manufacturer said it was impossible. You rebuilt the nanofabricator on Europa Station using nothing but spare parts and chewing gum." "It was duct tape, not chewing gum," Jack muttered, but he was already packing his tools. "And what exactly am I supposed to do about the Valaxian war machine when I get there?" "Ask them nicely to hold off their invasion while I fix the fusion core. Just get the core stabilized. The military reinforcements will arrive eventually." Jack sighed, shoving his tools into his beaten-up toolbox. "Fine, but I'm logging this as overtime, hazard pay, and holiday hours." "It's not a holiday, Jack." "It is somewhere in the galaxy." He terminated the call before Davis could argue further. 30 minutes later, Jack's repair shuttle, the Bolt Bucket, a vessel that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts, which it largely had been detached from the station. The ship wasn't pretty, but Jack had modified the engines himself. The Bolt Bucket could outrun military cruisers when it needed to, which was part of the reason Command kept overlooking Jack's insubordination and general attitude problems. As he plotted the course to Proxima Centauri, Jack took stock of his equipment: toolbox, emergency repair kit, portable nanofabricator, and of course problem solver. The wrench had gotten him out of more tight spots than he could count. Not just because it was the perfect tool for a surprising number of mechanical issues, but also because, in a pinch, it made a pretty effective weapon. Not that Jack was looking for a fight. He was a mechanic, not a soldier. His job was to fix things, not break them, though sometimes you had to break something to fix it properly. A philosophy Jack applied liberally to both machinery and interpersonal relationships. The Bolt Bucket's engines flared as it accelerated to FTL speed. Jack leaned back in his chair, already mentally reviewing what might cause a fusion core destabilization and how to fix it with limited resources. If he was lucky, he'd get in, fix the problem, and get out before encountering a single Valaxian. But as anyone who knew Jack Torqueson could attest, luck was rarely on his side. The Bolt Bucket dropped out of FTL on the far side of Proxima Centauri IE, using the planet itself as cover from the massive Valaxian flagship. Jack had served enough time on military vessels during his younger days to know basic stealth approaches. Not that his ship had any actual stealth technology, he was just really good at flying under the radar, literally and figuratively. As he approached the outpost, the situation looked grim. The defense batteries were silent, atmosphere was venting from one of the habitat modules, and Valaxian drop ships were already docked at the main airlocks. "Great," Jack muttered. "Just great." He guided the Bolt Bucket toward the maintenance airlock, a small, easily overlooked entry point that wasn't on the standard schematics. One advantage of being the guy who fixed things, you knew all the back doors. After docking, Jack suited up. His spacesuit wasn't standard issue, he'd modified it heavily over the years. The helmet had enhanced visual displays that could interface with most mechanical systems. The gloves had micro-manipulators for delicate work, and the whole thing was reinforced with salvaged armor plating. Not military grade, but enough to stop a stray bullet or energy beam. Most importantly, it had extra large pockets for tools. Jack cycled through the airlock and entered the outpost. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow, and warning klaxons blared intermittently. He checked his wrist computer. The fusion core was 3 levels down, and according to the readings, it was indeed approaching critical levels. "Let's hope the Valaxians are too busy being intimidating to notice a repair guy," Jack murmured, making his way through the maintenance corridors. He had almost reached the central hub when he heard the distinctive sound of Valaxian power armor. Jack ducked into a service alcove just as a squad of Imperial warriors marched past. They were impressive, he had to admit. Each soldier stood nearly 8 feet tall in their iridescent black armor, armed with weapons that probably cost more than Jack's entire ship. After they passed, Jack continued toward the central hub, only to freeze as he rounded the corner. The hub was filled with Valaxians, at least 20 of them, including what appeared to be their commander, a particularly large specimen with ornate markings on his armor. "Secure the remaining humans," the commander ordered, his translated voice booming through the chamber. "Find their communications array and destroy it. Leave no technology intact that could be of use to the coalition." Jack was about to retreat and find another route when a Valaxian soldier spotted him. "You there, human. Surrender immediately." Every head in the room turned toward Jack. He sighed, straightened up, and walked forward as if he belonged there. Sometimes the best way to handle a situation was to act like you were supposed to be in the middle of it. "Hey guys," Jack said casually, adjusting his tool belt. "Don't mind me, just here to fix the fusion core before it explodes and kills us all. Routine maintenance." The Valaxian commander stepped forward, towering over Jack. "You dare address the Imperial elite with such familiarity? Identify yourself, human." "Jack Torqueson, mechanic, level 7 clearance." "Serial number, you know what? I can never remember that part." He shrugged. "Look, I'm not military. I'm just here to stop this outpost from becoming a very expensive fireball in about." He checked his wrist computer. 47 minutes. "So, if you'll excuse me." The Valaxians looked at each other, clearly confused by this lone human's lack of fear. The commander's eye stalks twitched in what Jack assumed was amusement or disbelief. "You expect me to believe the humans sent a single maintenance worker to defend against the pride of the 17 galaxies?" The commander scoffed. "Defend? No, you've got it all wrong," Jack replied, edging toward the access hatch that would lead him to the fusion core levels. "I'm just here for the core. You guys can do whatever it is you do. Conquer, pillage, make threatening speeches. I won't get in your way if you don't get in mine." Now the commander was definitely amused. He turned to his subordinates. "The humans send their greatest warriors to face us, and we crush them. Now they send a mechanic." The Valaxian troops erupted in what Jack assumed passed for laughter in their culture, a strange huffing sound combined with vibrating eye stalks. "Let the human attempt his repairs," the commander declared magnanimously. "It will make no difference. Once we've secured the outpost, we will execute him along with the others." "Super," Jack muttered, looking forward to it. He continued toward the access hatch, noting with professional interest the various pieces of Valaxian technology. Their weapons, their armor, even their communication devices, all of it was advanced, yes, but also remarkably similar in its fundamental engineering principles. Different aesthetics, same problems. And Jack Torqueson was very, very good at identifying problems. The fusion core chamber was a mess. Jack could see immediately that the destabilization wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately sabotaged the containment field generators. Probably the outpost staff, trying to deny the Valaxians their prize. It was a desperate move, but Jack understood the reasoning. Better to destroy the outpost than let its technology fall into Imperial hands. Unfortunately, they hadn't counted on the Valaxians arriving with technical specialists who had already begun attempting to stabilize the core themselves. 3 Valaxian engineers were working at the control stations, their elongated fingers dancing over the unfamiliar human interfaces. "You're doing it wrong," Jack announced as he strolled into the chamber. The Valaxians spun around, weapons instantly drawn. Jack raised his hands, displaying his tools. "Easy there. Just stating a fact. You've got the containment field polarity reversed. That'll accelerate the destabilization, not prevent it." The lead Valaxian engineer, distinguishable by the additional technical apparatus attached to his armor, studied Jack suspiciously. How would a primitive human understand Valaxian engineering principles? Jack snorted. "I don't need to understand your engineering. I understand this core, and right now, you're about to turn a controlled meltdown into an uncontrolled one." After a tense moment, the lead engineer stepped aside. "Demonstrate human." Jack moved to the controls, immediately identifying the critical systems. As he worked, he surreptitiously examined the Valaxian tech. Their engineers had brought their own equipment, interfacing it with the human systems. Interesting design. Efficient, but with some very exploitable weaknesses. "So," Jack said conversationally as he rerouted power to the secondary containment fields, "I couldn't help but notice your quantum harmonizers are calibrated to a different frequency than what we use. Creates interference patterns in the neural networks, doesn't it?" The lead engineer's eye stalks twitched in surprise. "How could you possibly know about?" "Just an educated guess," Jack interrupted, finishing his adjustments. "There. That'll hold the core stable, temporarily." He hadn't actually fixed the problem, just bought time. The core would appear stable to any diagnostic scans, but he'd implemented a workaround that would fail in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes should be enough. "I'll need to check the coolant systems next," Jack said, already moving toward the door. The sabotage probably affected those too. The engineers conferred briefly, then allowed him to leave, with one of them following as an escort. Perfect. As Jack moved through the outpost's maintenance corridors, he made mental notes of every system he passed. Environmental controls, security protocols, communication arrays. Each stop was ostensibly to check for damage, but in reality Jack was executing an improvised plan. At the environmental control station, he accidentally dropped a specialized tool behind the console, then spent several minutes retrieving it while actually reconfiguring the life support systems. The Valaxian escort grew increasingly impatient but couldn't fit his bulky form into the tight space to see what Jack was really doing. "Sorry," Jack apologized, emerging with the tool. "Butterfingers." In the security hub, Jack disabled the outpost's automated defenses, making a show of checking for damage. What the Valaxians didn't notice was that he simultaneously reprogrammed the sensors to respond to a specific signal from his wrist computer. By the time they reached the communications array, Jack's escort was clearly bored with babysitting a human mechanic. He barely paid attention as Jack repaired the array, actually setting it up to broadcast a specific electromagnetic pulse when activated. "All done here," Jack announced cheerfully. "Just need to make one final adjustment to the core, and we should be all set." The Valaxian grunted what might have been acknowledgement and led Jack back toward the fusion core. As they walked, Jack activated a small device in his pocket, a simple remote trigger he'd assembled from spare parts during his repairs. Throughout the outpost, systems began to respond to his commands. Environmental controls recalibrated, security protocols reactivated under new parameters, and the communications array powered up for a targeted broadcast. By the time they reached the central hub again, the Valaxian commander was receiving urgent reports from throughout the outpost. Systems were malfunctioning. Armor was experiencing power fluctuations. Weapons were overheating. "What is happening?" the commander demanded of his technical staff. And that's when Jack made his move. "Having some technical difficulties?" Jack asked innocently as he strolled into the central hub. The Valaxian commander's eye stalks swiveled toward him. quivering with suspicion. "What have you done, human?" the commander demanded. Jack shrugged, casually reaching for problem solver in his tool belt. "Me? I'm just a mechanic. But if I had to guess, I'd say your fancy quantum neural interfaces are experiencing some harmonic feedback from our primitive human systems. This causes all sorts of problems. Power fluctuations, targeting system failures. Atmospheric regulators thinking your biochemistry is a toxic gas leak," he smiled. "Just a guess, though." The commander's translator emitted a series of clicking sounds that Jack assumed were Valaxian expletives. "Seize him." Two Imperial warriors moved toward Jack, their movements sluggish in their suddenly unresponsive armor. Jack's preparations had paid off. The electromagnetic pulse from the communications array was playing havoc with their systems. "You know what your biggest problem is?" Jack said, hefting problem solver. "Over engineering. Too many bells and whistles. Too many points of failure." He ducked under the first warrior's slow swing and brought his wrench down hard on a junction point in the Valaxian's armor. There was a satisfying crunch, followed by a shower of sparks. The warrior's armor locked up completely, leaving him frozen in an awkward pose. "See, like that," Jack continued, dodging the second warrior. "Human tech isn't as fancy, but it's resilient. Adaptable." He swung problem solver again, catching the second warrior at the knee joint. More sparks, more mechanical failure. "We build things to be fixed, not replaced." By now, the remaining Valaxians had drawn their weapons, but many were experiencing the same issues: targeting systems gone haywire, power cores fluctuating, neural interfaces sending conflicting commands. The once imposing Imperial warriors were reduced to stumbling, confused figures in malfunctioning armor. The commander, however, seemed to be faring better. His armor, more advanced than the others, had apparently shielded him from the worst effects of Jack's sabotage. "You will pay for this insolence," the commander growled, drawing a wicked-looking energy blade. "I will personally extract your organs and feed them to the void beasts of Talaxis IV." "Charming," Jack replied, assessing the situation. The commander's armor was indeed more resistant, but it still operated on the same principles. And principles could be exploited. As the commander lunged forward, Jack sidestepped, not quite fast enough to avoid a glancing blow that scorched his shoulder. Pain lanced through him, but he ignored it, focusing instead on the commander's movements. The armor was compensating for the electromagnetic disruption, but at a cost. It was drawing additional power from secondary systems. Systems like the atmospheric processors that allowed the Valaxian to breathe in human-compatible environments. Jack grinned. "Having trouble breathing, Commander?" "Your armor's rerouting life support power to maintain combat functionality. Sufficient in the short term, but not sustainable." The commander paused, his breathing indeed becoming labored. His eye stalks twitched in what Jack recognized as surprise. "How could you possibly?" "I told you, I understand machines. Your armor's a machine. Just a really fancy one with a bad attitude inside it." The commander roared and charged again. This time Jack was ready. He waited until the last moment, then ducked and rolled, coming up behind the Valaxian. With all his strength, he brought Problem Solver down on a specific point where the commander's armor connected to his atmosphere processor. There was a crack, a hiss of escaping gas, and the commander staggered. His energy blade flickered and went dark as the armor diverted all remaining power to life support, exactly as Jack had predicted. "And that," Jack said, rising to his feet and twirling his wrench, "is why you don't overcomplicate perfectly good engineering." Around the hub, the remaining functional Valaxians were retreating, dragging their incapacitated comrades. Without their commander's leadership, and with their technology failing them, the once fearsome Imperial warriors were in disarray. The commander himself had dropped to one knee, his armor now in emergency power conservation mode. He looked up at Jack, his eye stalks drooping in what might have been disbelief or respect. What are you? He wheezed through his failing translator. Jack shrugged, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. Told you from the start. I'm the mechanic. With a final glare, the commander activated his emergency teleporter, a last resort device that Jack had deliberately left functional and vanished in a shower of particles. Jack looked around at the chaos he'd created. Well, he muttered to himself, that's one way to clear a room. Then he remembered the fusion core. Oh, right, that. The Valaxian retreat was chaotic but thorough. Drop ships disengaged from the outpost, sometimes tearing away chunks of the docking mechanisms in their haste. The inevitable conquest itself began pulling away from orbit, apparently deciding that this particular human outpost wasn't worth the trouble. Meanwhile, Jack had returned to the fusion core and was actually fixing it this time, muttering to himself about amateur sabotage and shoddy emergency protocols. His shoulder throbbed where the commander's energy blade had caught him, but he'd patched it with a medical kit from the outpost's infirmary. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold until he could get proper treatment. The outpost's surviving staff who had been locked in the storage bays during the Valaxian occupation were now free and helping with emergency repairs. They kept giving Jack strange looks as if they couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. So let me get this straight, said Lieutenant Reyes, the highest-ranking officer still conscious. Command sent, just you, against an entire Valaxian elite regiment. I know, right? Jack replied, not looking up from the fusion core controls. Cheap bastards. I'm definitely charging overtime for this. But how did they had quantum phase disruptors and reality-splitting cannons and over-engineered armor with exploitable weaknesses, Jack finished for her. Look, Lieutenant, most people see fancy alien tech and think it's magic. I see fancy alien tech and think about how it works. And once you know how something works, you know how to break it. He made a final adjustment, and the fusion core's warning lights changed from red to green. Or fix it, as the case may be. By the time coalition military vessels arrived, expecting to find a destroyed outpost in Valaxian occupation, they instead discovered a functioning facility, surviving personnel, and one very grumpy mechanic demanding a ride home. The debriefing back at command lasted for hours. Jack, still wearing his scorched and damaged work clothes, explained how he'd turned the outpost systems against the Valaxians, exploited weaknesses in their technology, and driven off an elite Imperial regiment with nothing but his tools and knowledge. Commander Davis looked like he couldn't decide whether to court-martial Jack for recklessness or recommend him for the highest civilian honor. So, you're telling me, Davis said slowly, that you defeated the pride of the 17 galaxies, the unstoppable phalanx, the Emperor's own elite guard, with a wrench? Jack patted problem solver, which he'd refused to relinquish even during the debriefing. Not just any wrench, sir. A really good wrench. The story spread throughout human space faster than FTL communication should have allowed. By the end of the week, it had grown in the telling. Jack had single-handedly fought off 50 Valaxian warriors. No, 100. He'd reprogrammed their flagship to play nothing but human disco music. He'd sent the Emperor a bill for his services. The Valaxians, for their part, were suspiciously quiet in the aftermath of what became known as the Wrench Incident. Intelligence reports suggested that Imperial military strategists were frantically studying human maintenance protocols and equipment schematics, apparently convinced that human mechanics represented some kind of secret warrior class. 3 months later, when a Valaxian scout ship experienced engine trouble near human space, the crew abandoned the vessel rather than risk encountering a human repair team. The ship was later recovered with a message left in crude human script, "We fear the ones with tools." Jack himself returned to his regular duties, though with a significant pay raise and a new workshop. He still complained about the coffee synthesizer. He still modified his equipment against regulations. And he still carried Problem Solver everywhere he went. When asked about his legendary encounter with the Valaxian elite, Jack would typically shrug and say, "They had fancy weapons and battle strategies. I had a wrench and an understanding of basic engineering principles." It wasn't really a fair fight. He wasn't wrong. After all, in the vastness of space, among all the advanced civilizations and their mighty technologies, sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is one angry mechanic with a wrench. And the Valaxian Empire had learned that lesson the hard way